My name is Sylvie Radcliffe. I was 34 the night my mother tried to give my sister a house that was never hers to give. I had just earned the biggest commission of my life, $5 million, and I drove straight to my parents' house because some foolish part of me still wanted to see them proud. I never made it past the front door. Inside, my mother was telling my sister, "The house is yours, honey. By Monday, she and that boy are on their own." That boy was my 6-year-old son. He was standing beside me in his little jacket, pressing his face into his sleeve so I wouldn't see him cry. I didn't knock. I didn't beg. I took his hand and walked him back to the car, because my mother had forgotten one simple thing about that house. By the next morning, my name was on the news, and to understand why that one sentence destroyed everything, you have to understand the 6 years that came before it. So let me take you back. The porch light at my parents' house was the kind you don't buy for yourself. Warm, low, gold, chosen the way you'd choose a filter. My mother had replaced it 3 times until the glow fell across the front steps just so, until the brick looked like something out of a magazine at dusk. That light was the first thing you saw when you turned onto their street, and it told you everything. This was a good family, a settled family, a family with nothing to hide. In our stretch of Franklin, where the Sunday church lot fills with detailed SUVs and people choose their porch lights to photograph well, a family's picture wasn't a picture. It was your standing. I came up those steps most evenings with my arms full. Groceries, Micah's backpack, a folder from the office. My mother, Gail, would open the door before I knocked, and for a half second, her face would do the thing it did for cameras. Soft, delighted, lit from the inside. Then she'd see it was only me. "Sylvie, grab the trash on your way in, sweetheart," she said one evening, already turning back toward the kitchen. The warmth clicked off like a switch. It always did. I used to think I imagined it. I didn't. On the wall in the front hall hung the family portrait, the big one, the one they'd had done professionally, everyone in soft neutral colors against a cream backdrop. My mother, my father Dean, my sister Brooke, Brooke's husband Colton, their 2 children. Everyone angled toward the light. I stood in that hall 100 times before I let myself really look at it. When I finally did, I noticed the composition was a little off on the left side, a little empty, as if the frame had been built for one more person and then that person had been quietly left out. I told myself I was imagining that too. There was a rhythm to that house, and my place in it was fixed. I was the one who noticed the water heater was going. I was the one who called the roofer, who caught the property tax notice before it lapsed, who kept a spare of everything. My mother called it being so capable, Sylvie, the way you'd praise a reliable appliance. Brooke was the one who'd built something. I was the one who kept the lights on, literally, some months, and somehow that made me smaller in that kitchen, not larger. I never understood it. I'm not sure I understand it now. My sister Brooke was, by the time our story starts, a small kind of famous. Her brand was called Blessed and Homegrown, and it was exactly what it sounds like, a warmly lit, faith-flavored vision of the perfect Southern family. Cast iron skillets and scripture on the chalkboard, matching pajamas on Christmas morning, 2 golden children, Harper and Lincoln, running through a field at sunset, while a caption underneath talked about gratitude. The center of the whole operation was the Sunday shoot. Every Sunday afternoon, in my parents' living room, Brooke set up a ring light and a tripod, and the family arranged itself into an image. My mother in her pearls, my father in a pressed shirt, Colton with a hand on Harper's shoulder, and Brooke in the middle of it, glowing, directing, telling everyone where to stand. My son loved being included in things. He was 6. He would run to get in the frame with his cousins, thrilled to be part of the picture, and every Sunday my sister would look at him with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Micah, honey, sit this one out. You keep blinking," she said. Or he was too close to the edge. Or the light wasn't right on him. There was always a reason, delivered sweetly, and Micah would climb down off the couch and come stand next to me by the doorway, and we would watch the rest of them become a family for the camera. I want to be honest about something. For a long time, I let myself believe it was clumsiness, insensitivity, that my sister simply didn't think about how it looked to a little boy to be waved out of every photo. I told myself she was self-absorbed, not cruel. There is a difference, and I clung to the difference like it was a railing. The thing my family agreed on, without ever saying it out loud, was that I had gotten lucky. I sold real estate. To my mother, that meant I showed houses. A phrase she said the way you describe a hobby. When I closed a difficult deal, she would ask if I'd had a nice time. When Brooke hit 100,000 followers, my mother framed the screenshot. "Brooke actually built something," she said once, at a dinner where I'd mentioned, quietly, that I'd had a good quarter. You show houses. What none of them knew, what none of them wanted to know, was the shape of the last few years. My success had never been loud. It had come in slowly, deal by deal, over 11 years of early mornings and unanswered open houses, and it never once looked like the kind of money my mother respected, because I didn't wear it. I drove a sensible car. I saved. And in 2021, when my parents nearly lost this house, when the letters from the bank started coming and my father stopped opening the mail, I was the one who quietly stepped in. I paid off what they owed. They signed the house over to me at a title office on a Tuesday, both of them relieved and a little humiliated, and afterward my mother thanked me in the parking lot in a voice so small I barely heard it. Then we drove home, and by dinner she had already begun to fold the whole thing back into a version she could live with. "This house has been in our family for a long time," she liked to say to guests, standing in the kitchen I had kept over their heads. I let her say it. I moved in with Micah the same year, told myself it was so he'd grow up with grandparents, with a family, with the thing I never quite got to have. Told myself that if I was patient, if I was useful enough, one day the warmth in that porch light would fall on us too. Some foolish part of me still believed that. Right up until the deal of my life, and the drive home, and the door. The phone rang on a gray afternoon almost 7 years ago now, and everything I am began with it. I was 28 when the agency called. There was a baby, a little boy, a few weeks old, and a situation that meant he needed a home and a folder on someone's desk with my name in it. I remember standing in my kitchen with the phone against my ear and my other hand flat on the counter to keep myself upright. The first time they put him in my arms, he was so light it frightened me. He had a hospital bracelet on his tiny wrist, the plastic kind, printed with a name that wasn't mine yet, and I remember running my thumb over it and thinking that I would spend the rest of my life earning the right to take it off. There is a photograph from that day. A real one. Not staged, not lit. Just a caseworker holding up my phone while I looked down at this small person who had, without my permission, become the center of the earth. My hair's a mess in it. I'm crying and laughing at the same time. It is the only picture I own where I look completely undefended. Those first months were just the two of us against the world, and I have never been so tired or so sure of anything. I learned the particular weight of him asleep on my chest at 3 a.m. I learned which cry meant hungry and which meant hold me. I did it alone, and I didn't mind alone, because alone with him was still the fullest my life had ever been. I kept waiting to feel like I was missing something. I never did. He was not a consolation for a family I didn't have. He was the family. "You're mine now," I whispered to him that first night, in a chair by a window. That's the whole story. I called my mother from that same chair. I was so full of it I could barely get the words out. And there was a pause on the line, just a beat too long. And then she said, "Well, isn't that something?" Not congratulations. Not his name. Just, "Isn't that something?" The way you'd respond to news about a stranger. I told myself she was surprised. I was always telling myself something. My son's name is Micah, and from the very beginning my family treated him like a guest who had overstayed. It started small, the way these things do. At the first holiday, my mother introduced Harper and Lincoln to a visiting cousin as my grandbabies, and then gestured at Micah, asleep on my shoulder, and said, "And that's Sylvie's little one." Not a grandchild, a little one. A footnote with a heartbeat. When Brooke's kids outgrew their clothes, the boxes came to us. Harper's faded jackets, Lincoln's stained onesies, handed over with the air of a favor. Meanwhile, the Golden Children knew everything, and it was all documented. The unboxings, the first day of school outfits, the matching Christmas pajamas that somehow only ever came in the right number of sizes for the children who photographed well. His birthdays were the hardest to watch. Harper's parties were events, a themed backdrop, a balloon arch, a photographer, 100 strangers watching online sing to a 4-year-old. When Micah turned 5, my mother didn't want to make a fuss. And the fuss she didn't want to make turned out to be any fuss at all. No party at the house, no photo on the feed. I threw him one myself, at a pizza place across town, just the 2 of us and 2 boys from his class, and a grocery store cake with his name spelled right. He was so happy he cried a little, and I told him it was because the cake was that good, and he believed me, because he was 5 and he wanted to. I brought pictures of it to Sunday dinner, hoping, my mother would want to see. She looked at 3 of them, said, "That's nice, honey," and set the phone face down on the table to pass the potatoes. That was the whole review. Face down, and the potatoes, and the portrait. When my parents redid the family portrait, the big one in the hall, they scheduled it on a weekend Micah and I were away. I found out because I saw the finished print before I understood what I was looking at. Everyone in soft neutrals, everyone angled toward the light. And a little empty space on the left, where a small boy in a borrowed jacket might have stood. I asked my mother about it once. Just once. I kept my voice level. "He's yours," she said, not unkindly, which was somehow worse. "He's just not ours, not by blood." She said it the way you'd explain a seating chart. Then she went back to arranging flowers, and I stood in that kitchen and felt the floor tilt very slightly under me, and I did what I always did. I put it away. I told myself he was too young to understand. I told myself I would make up the difference. I told myself the love in that house was just quiet. I was wrong about how young you have to be to understand. Children understand everything. They just don't have the words to accuse you. I found the drawing when Micah was 5. He'd been quiet in his room after a Sunday shoot, and when I went to check on him, he was lying on his stomach on the floor with his crayons, tongue between his teeth, working hard. On the paper was our family. All of them. My mother, my father, Brooke, Colton, the cousins, drawn in the wobbly, generous way small children draw the people they love. Everyone with enormous smiles and stick arms reaching out. And there, at the edge, squeezed in on the left side, a little smaller than the rest, standing slightly apart, was a boy with brown crayon hair, holding the hand of a woman he had labeled, in careful, uneven letters, Mom. He'd drawn himself into the picture. Because he was never in the real ones, I knelt down next to him on that floor. I don't remember deciding to. One second I was standing, and the next I was on the carpet beside him, and the room had gone very far away, and my hands were not entirely steady when I reached out to touch the corner of the page. "Baby," I managed, "why did you put yourself all the way over here?" He didn't look up from his coloring. "I put me in," he said, "so we don't forget. I have negotiated deals across a table from men who would have eaten me alive if I'd let them see anything." I did not make a sound. I sat on that floor, and I held the edge of a crayon drawing, and I stayed exactly as still as I had trained myself to stay. And inside me, something I had been protecting for 5 years quietly came apart. That was the day I stopped telling myself stories. But it would be another year before I understood that my son wasn't being forgotten. He was being erased, on purpose, for money. By the time Micah was 6, Blessed and Homegrown had 1.3 million followers. The brand had grown into something with a shape and an appetite. There were sponsors now. There were rate cards. My sister spoke, without irony, about the family's aesthetic and protecting the brand. And the Sunday shoots got longer and more precise, because the picture wasn't just a picture anymore. It was inventory. I started to notice the crops. I hadn't been looking before. You don't look for a thing you can't imagine. But once I saw it, I couldn't stop. A photo of the whole family on the porch. And in the corner, if you knew to look, the faintest curve of an elbow that had been trimmed away. A kitchen scene where the counter was strangely empty on one side, the composition just slightly wrong, the way the portrait in the hall was wrong. It was mica. It was always mica, sliced neatly out of frame after frame after frame, so cleanly you'd never notice unless you were his mother. One evening, I overheard Brooke and Colton at the kitchen table, going over the month's numbers on a laptop. I wasn't trying to listen. I was getting Micah a glass of water. "We can't use the Easter set," Brooke was saying. "He's in half of them." "So cut him," Colton said, not even looking up. "The numbers only work if the picture's clean." The picture's clean. My son? A smudge to be wiped off a lens. I stood in the dark hallway with a plastic cup of water going warm in my hand, and I understood finally that this was not carelessness. Carelessness leaves accidents. This left edges. The sponsorship changed the clock on everything. That spring, Brooke landed the biggest deal of her career, a partnership with Cedar Line Home, a wholesome, church-friendly home goods brand, the kind that puts blessed on a doormat and sells it for $40. There was to be a signature campaign, a live-streamed family day at the house, sponsored, promoted, the whole picture-perfect clan gathered in one shot. It was scheduled for a Sunday. There was a brief, an actual document, and I saw it on the counter one morning while I was making Micah's lunch. It used the phrase, "wholesome, all-American family," and someone, Brooke, had underlined the word real. The pressure in the house tightened like a held breath. Brooke was short with everyone, obsessed with what she kept calling the frame. And there was a conversation I was not supposed to hear, low voices in the dining room, my sister and my mother. "Cedar Line wants the real thing, Mom," Brooke said. "Not complicated." Complicated. That was the word for us now. For me, the daughter who showed houses. For Micah, the boy who kept ending up in the corner of the shot. I noticed that week that I was no longer looped in on family plans. A dinner happened that I only heard about afterward. A quick family meeting I was told about the next day, in passing, as though I were staff. I told myself it was the stress of the campaign. I was, as ever, telling myself something. I started paying attention after that. The way you pay attention once you finally admit what you're seeing. I noticed the family calendar on the fridge had a red circle around that Sunday, and the word Cedar Line in my sister's handwriting. I noticed my mother had begun talking about simplifying. Simplifying the house, simplifying the holidays, simplifying who was in the photos. I noticed that when I walked into a room, conversations changed direction, smoothly, like water going around a stone. And I noticed that no one, not once, asked where Micah and I would go. It wasn't a question in that house. We were a logistics problem with a deadline, and the deadline had a brand attached to it. I didn't yet know that the plan being made in those low-voiced conversations had a deadline attached, and that the deadline was Monday, and that the thing being scheduled for removal, quietly, cleanly, before the cameras rolled on Sunday, was us. On a Friday in early June, I made history. I closed the largest residential sale in the region's record, a property so far above anything the market had seen that the number didn't feel real when I wrote it down. My commission alone was $5 million. I sat in my car in the parking lot afterward, with my hands in my lap and let it land. 11 years. Every early morning. Every open house nobody came to. Every time my mother asked if I'd had a nice time showing houses, my phone lit up on the passenger seat. One message after another. Colleagues and clients. A broker I admired who wrote only, "You just made history." And here's the part I am not proud of. My first clear thought, sitting in that car a rich woman, was not about the money. It was about the porch light. It was, maybe now. Maybe now they'll be proud. Maybe now the warmth will fall on us too. I stopped and bought Micah a little wooden toy on the way, a set of animals he'd pointed at once in a shop window, and I buckled him into the back seat and told him we were going to surprise Grandma and Grandpa with wonderful news. He asked if there would be cake. I said we'd get cake after. He held the paper bag of wooden animals on his lap and kicked his feet against the seat, and I drove us toward the house I owned, toward the golden light, toward the front door. some foolish part of me still hoping. The house was glowing when we pulled up. Every window warm, the porch light doing its practiced magic across the brick. Across the street, at the Kesslers, a small red light blinked steadily above the neighbor's door. Wendy Kessler's camera, the one she was famous on the block for, the one that caught every delivery truck and stray cat on the whole street. I noticed it the way you notice furniture. I filed it under nothing. I took Micah's hand and we came up the walk. He had his paper bag clutched to his chest. I could hear voices inside, my mother's and my sister's, carrying through the front door, which stood open behind the screen against the June warmth. I meant to walk right in. I had my key. It was, after all, my house. But there is a particular stillness that comes over you when you hear your own name in a room you haven't entered yet, and I stopped on the top step with my hand halfway to the door, and I listened. They were mid-conversation, relaxed, certain. The voices of people who did not know they were being overheard, discussing a decision that had clearly already been made. I couldn't make out all of it at first, just the shape of it. My mother's voice, warm and final, the way it got when she was giving a gift. Micah went still beside me. Children hear tone before they hear words. Then it came through the screen, clear and unhurried, the way you'd talk about the weather. "The house is yours, honey," my mother said. "By Monday, she and that boy are on their own." Time did a strange thing. It slowed and thickened, the June air going syrupy, the porch light suddenly too bright. I heard my sister laugh softly, pleased, agreeable, and my father say nothing at all, which was its own kind of answer. She and that boy. I looked down. Micah was looking up at me. He had understood every word. His paper bag of wooden animals was still clutched to his chest, and his face had gone very carefully blank, the way it did on Sundays by the doorway, and then his chin trembled once and he turned his face into the crook of his own arm, into the sleeve of his little jacket, so that I wouldn't see him cry. He was 6 years old and he already knew to hide it. I did not feel my heart break. That's not the truth of the moment. The truth is that everything in me went quiet and level and cold, the way a lake goes flat before weather. My hand was still raised toward the door. I lowered it. Somewhere behind that screen, my mother was giving away my house to my sister and setting a deadline for the removal of my son, and I stood on the step I had paid for, and I did not make a sound. He didn't ask me why. That's what I keep coming back to. He didn't turn to me and ask why Grandma said that. He already knew there was no why that would help. He just hid his face and waited for me to decide what we would do. So I decided. I knelt down on the top step so I was level with him. I could smell the crayon and outside smell of his hair. I reached out and gently pulled his arm away from his face and wiped his cheek with my thumb. Once, and I kept my voice low and even and completely steady, because he needed at least one steady thing in the world, and I was going to be it. "We're going home, baby," I said. "Not this house. Home." He didn't know yet that those had never been the same place. I stood and I took his hand, and I did not knock, and I did not beg, and I did not open that door to say a single word to the people on the other side of it. I turned us around and we walked back down the warm-lit steps and across the lawn to the car. His small hand in mine, his wooden animals still hugged to his chest. I buckled him in. I got in. My hands were perfectly still on the wheel, which frightened me more than shaking would have. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced without meaning to at the Kesslers across the street. The little red light above Wendy Kessler's door was still blinking, steady and patient, pointed out at the whole quiet street. My mother thought that was the end of me, that by Monday the complication would be gone, the frame would be clean, and the picture could go on being perfect. She had forgotten one simple thing about that house. But I'll get to that. If you had been standing on that porch, your child's hand in yours, listening to your own mother decide who got to keep a home and who got until Monday, what would you have done? Would you have opened that door? I didn't. Not that night. Sit with that question, because what I did instead is the entire reason you're hearing this story at all. So before I take you back into it, if you're already pulling for the quiet one, Do me one small kindness. Hit like and subscribe. I tell these stories all the way through, and you'll want to be here when this one lands. That night, in a hotel room 2 towns over, after Micah finally fell asleep with his wooden animals lined up on the nightstand, I opened my sister's page. I don't know exactly what I was looking for. Proof, maybe. Something to hold against the flat cold thing that had settled in my chest. I scrolled, and I made myself look, really look, the way I'd never let myself look before. It was everywhere once you saw it. Post after post, year after year, and in every single one, the small clean absence where my son should have been. The porch photos with the trimmed corner. The kitchen shots with the empty counter. A beach trip where 5 people stood at the waterline and the sand beside them was mysteriously scuffed, as though a 6th set of footprints had been smoothed away. 60 of them, at least, when I stopped being able to count. 60 times my son had been lifted out of his own family's memory so the picture would be clean. I kept scrolling anyway, the way you press on a bruise. There were captions under those careful, glowing photos about gratitude, about counting your blessings, about how family is everything. Family is everything. Written beneath a picture my son had been cut out of an hour before it posted. I read a dozen of them. Each one was a small, tidy lie with a heart at the end of it, and thousands of strangers had liked it and believed it, and not one of them knew that the warmth in the frame was borrowed, and the family in it was missing a person on purpose. And then, in one, just one, they'd missed. A crowded frame from a 4th of July, everyone laughing, and there at the very bottom edge, half-cropped and easy to overlook, was a small sneaker. Micah's sneaker, the blue one with the frayed lace. They'd cut away all of him except one shoe, and even that they'd only left by accident. I sat in the dark of that hotel room and looked at my son's shoe on my sister's beautiful feed, and I understood that I was not looking at neglect. I was looking at labor. Someone had done this. Over and over, deliberately, with care. I didn't yet know who held the proof, but I was about to find out that someone had kept every version they'd tried to erase. Her name was Tara Bishop, and she had managed my sister's brand for almost 3 years before she quit. I'd met Tara a handful of times at the house, a sharp-tired woman who was always the last one working while everyone else posed. She'd been kind to Micah in a plain, unremarkable way that I'd noticed precisely because no one else was. Once, when he'd been waved out of a shot, she'd quietly handed him a juice box behind the tripod. I'd never forgotten it. She reached out the day after the door. A short message. I saw you leave on Friday. I think it's time you knew some things. Can we talk? We met at a diner off the interstate. Tara didn't waste words. She set her phone on the table between us and turned it to face me, and she scrolled through a folder. Her own archive, the raw files, everything before the crop. There was my son, whole and grinning, in the center of 100 frames he'd later be cut out of. There he was blowing out candles. There he was in matching pajamas that I'd been told didn't come in his size. All of it real. All of it kept. She didn't crop him because he moved, Tara said, watching my face. She kept a list. She showed me that, too. Messages. My sister's own words, in writing, over years. Instructions, plain as a grocery list. Crop the boy. He's off-brand. Cedarline won't want him in the family shots. Keep it to blood. There was no ambiguity in it, no room for the story I'd been telling myself. My sister had built a monument to a family and had methodically chiseled my son out of it, and she had written down the reasons. I asked Tara why she'd kept it. Any of it. She turned her coffee cup a slow half-circle on the table before she answered. Because I have a nephew, she said. Adopted. Same age as your boy. She didn't elaborate, and she didn't need to. I sat behind that tripod for 3 years and handed him juice boxes and told myself it wasn't my family, it wasn't my call. Then one Sunday, your sister made me delete a whole set because he'd wandered into the shots, and I went home and I couldn't sleep. So I stopped deleting. I just moved them to a drive she didn't know about. I don't even know what I thought I'd do with them. She looked up at me. I guess I was waiting for you to be ready. I thought about all the Sundays I'd stood in that doorway with Micah, certain no one else saw it. Someone had. Someone had been quietly saving the proof that my son existed, one file at a time, for years, in the dark. "There's one more thing," Tara said, quieter now, sliding the phone back. "About the house. Something you should—" She stopped. I think she saw that I already knew, or was about to, because I did know. I'd known for years, without letting myself say it, and now the whole shape of it stood up in front of me at once. Every one of those images, the warm kitchen, the golden living room, the porch at dusk, the entire visual world of blessed and homegrown, the wholesome family the sponsors paid for and the followers believed in, had been filmed inside my house. The house I'd bought, the house I'd paid off so my parents wouldn't lose it, the rooms I kept over their heads while they called me the daughter who showed houses. My sister had monetized a perfect family in the home of the daughter she treated as a stranger, and she had erased my son, frame by frame, from the very walls I'd rescued. I said it out loud once, sitting in that diner. Not loudly, just to hear whether it was true. They built it in my house. Tara didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She just looked at me with the expression of someone who has been waiting a long time for another person to finally see the thing she couldn't unsee. And I remembered, then, the brief on the counter, the underlined word, the Sunday shoot, the sponsored family day, the live stream, the whole picture-perfect clan gathered in one clean frame, scheduled for that Sunday the next day in my living room. They'd wanted us gone by Monday so that nothing complicated would be in the house. They were going to stage the most important broadcast of my sister's career inside my house, celebrating a family that had no room for my child. Micah woke up the next morning in a hotel bed and asked if we could have pancakes. I ordered too many. We ate them at the little table by the window with the curtains open and the light coming in, and he told me a long, serious story about the wooden animals and which ones were friends, and I listened to all of it. I didn't check my phone. For 1 hour that morning, in a rented room with syrup on the table, it was just the two of us, and nobody was arranging us into anything. He got quiet at one point, a bite halfway to his mouth, and looked around the small, ordinary room. "Is this our house now?" he asked. Something moved in my chest that I didn't fight. "It's ours," I said. My voice didn't come out quite level, and I let it not. He nodded slowly, taking this in, and then he asked the question that undid me. He asked it carefully, the way he asked things he wasn't sure he was allowed to want. "Can I be in the pictures here?" I had to look out the window for a moment. A parking lot. A gray morning. Nothing to see. I looked at it anyway until I could answer him. "Every single one," I said. "You're the reason for the pictures. We spent that first strange week building something small and ours." I bought him a disposable camera, the cheap cardboard kind, and told him he was in charge of pictures now. He took it everywhere. He photographed the pancakes, and his own shoes, and me from an unflattering angle first thing in the morning, and a pigeon in the parking lot he was very proud of. When we finally got them developed, weeks later, more than half of them had his own thumb over the corner of the lens. I framed one of those too, a blurry thumb-smudged photo of nothing in particular, taken by a 6-year-old who had never once been trusted with a camera. It is one of the best things I own. There was a knock that afternoon, and it was Wendy Kessler. I don't know how she found the hotel. Wendy knew things. It was her nature. But there she was in the hallway with a foil-covered plate, 55 years old and direct as a hammer. She'd made too much food, she said, which was a lie. And she'd brought some for the little man. And she crouched right down to Micah's level and said, "Hello, Micah," using his name like it was the most ordinary thing in the world, and handed him the plate herself. Then she stood back up and looked at me, and her face changed. "I need to show you something," she said, "and then you're going to tell me what you want me to do with it." She had her phone out. It was the camera above her door, the one with the little red light, the one that watched the whole street. The footage was from Friday evening, a wide, grainy shot across the road. The golden porch, the open screen door, and on the steps, A woman kneeling down to a small boy, wiping his face, taking his hand, walking him to a car, driving away. You couldn't hear my mother's words on it. You could barely see Micah's face, and I was glad of that. But you could see everything that mattered. You could see a child being turned away from a house, and a mother choosing to leave with him rather than fight on a doorstep. I filmed the whole street, Wendy said. Turns out this time it mattered. She held the phone out flat between us, the clip queued up and ready. I'll do whatever you say. Post it, delete it, sit on it. It's your boy. It's your call. I could have taken that phone. I want you to understand that I could have. I could have posted the clip myself with a caption that burned. I could have laid out the crops, the messages, the list, the whole architecture of it, and lit a fire under my sister's perfect life and watched it go up. I had the receipts. I had Tara's archive and Wendy's footage, and 11 years of being underestimated and one very good reason, asleep in a hotel bed, to make them pay. I didn't. Not because I forgave them. I want to be clear about that too. It wasn't grace and it wasn't weakness. It was that I looked at that little red-lit clip of my son being led away, and I decided I was not going to spend one more ounce of my life performing my pain for the people who caused it. I wasn't going to be the loud one, the vengeful one, the character in my sister's story who finally lost her temper. That's what they expected of a complication. I'm not going to fight them, I told Wendy, and I heard how steady it was, and I meant it all the way down. I'm going to outlast them. I told her to follow her own conscience with the footage, that whatever she chose, I'd stand by it, but I wouldn't be the one to press the button. That week, Micah's kindergarten teacher, Ms. Farrow, stopped me at pickup to say she'd hung his drawing in the classroom, the one where the whole family held hands. I put him front and center, she said, smiling. He's the kindest kid I've got. She had no idea what she'd handed me. I drove home with it and had to pull over once. My phone, in my bag, had gone quiet. Then, that evening, it started. 52 missed calls from my mother by midnight. I didn't answer a single one. I didn't have to make a scene. Somebody had already filmed one. By 8 o'clock the next morning, my name was on the news. Not the local blog, the real news, the regional business segment, a clean graphic and a reporter's voice. The largest residential sale in the region's history, closed by a broker named Sylvie Radcliffe. There was a photo of me from the brokerage website, professional, composed. There was the number. For about 20 minutes, I was simply a success story, the woman who'd made history, and my phone filled up with congratulations from people who had no idea what my week had been. And then the two stories found each other. Wendy had posted her clip the night before. No fire, no caption that burned, just the plain footage and 4 quiet words. This is my neighbor. It had been sitting there, small, sad, a woman and a crying child leaving a glowing house. But now the woman in the grainy clip had a name and a face on the morning news, and the internet does what the internet does. Someone recognized the porch. Someone recognized the golden living room behind the open screen door. A comment appeared under Wendy's post, then 1,000 of them. That's the blessed and homegrown house. Wait, isn't that the influencer family? The woman leaving with the little boy. That's the record-breaking broker from the news. By 9, the two stories were one story, and it had a gravity all its own, and it was pulling everything toward it. I watched it happen from the little desk in the hotel room, Micah building a tower out of plastic cups on the floor behind me. It was the strangest feeling, to be, for one morning, 2 people at once. On one screen, a composed woman in a blazer who had made history. On another, a grainy figure kneeling to a crying child, on a porch. Strangers were stitching the two together in real time, and every time they did, the number under the clip jumped again. I didn't feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. Mostly I felt tired, and I kept getting up to check that the hotel room door was locked, and I couldn't have told you why. Some part of me was still braced for a knock, for the family to arrive and explain, in that warm, rehearsed voice, why none of this was what it looked like. By noon, the clip had 8 million views, And the thing my mother had forgotten about that house had become the only thing anyone wanted to talk about. Because the internet is relentless, and it is fast, and property records are public. Someone, a stranger, 1,000 strangers, looked up the deed to the famous, blessed, and homegrown house, the wholesome family home in every sponsored photo, and found a single name on it. Not my mother's, not my father's, not my sister's, mine. The comment climbed to the top of every thread and stayed there. Wait. The house is in her name. The house the influencer family filmed in. The house the sponsors paid to be associated with. The house my mother had so graciously given to my sister on a Friday evening belonged legally and entirely to the daughter they'd set a Monday deadline to remove. And beside that fact sat the other one, the one people couldn't stop looking at. The little boy cropped out of 100 photos, the little boy in the grainy clip, was that same daughter's son. Before noon, everyone knew what my mother had really tried to give away. Not just a house that was never hers. A daughter, a grandson, a whole real family, cut out of the frame so a fake one could be sold. My phone rang and rang. I let most of it go, but I listened to one voicemail. My mother's voice stripped of all its warmth, tight and fast and frightened. "Sylvie," she said, "you need to make this stop." And then, in my inbox, an email forwarded to me by Tara, who was still on some old thread. It was from Cedar Line Home, addressed to my sister. The subject line was 3 words. "We need to talk." My sister's first instinct was to make a video. She posted it that afternoon, soft lighting, no makeup, a careful tremble in her voice. She sat on the couch in my living room, in my house, and she talked about how much the family loved Micah, how he was simply shy, camera shy, how cruel people were twisting a private family matter into something ugly. "People are twisting our family's heart," she said, pressing a hand to her chest, and a single tear made its way down exactly one cheek. It did not go the way she'd planned. Because underneath that video sat 8 million people who had already seen the receipts, and they were not moved by a tear from a woman who kept a list. They pulled up the crops. They lined up the before and afters. Tara's whole archive was circulating by then. The real photos beside the erased ones. My son present, and then gone. Present, and then gone. 60 times over. Camera shy doesn't crop a child out of his own birthday. Camera shy doesn't leave one shoe by accident. The internet knew the difference between shy and erased, and it said so, millions of times. My mother went the other direction. She got on the phone and rallied. The church, the extended family, the network of respectable people whose good opinion was the whole point. I heard about it secondhand. Gail Radcliffe was telling everyone this was a smear, that a godly family was under attack, that Sylvie had always been jealous and difficult. It might even have worked, a few years ago, in a quieter world. But somewhere in the middle of one of those defensive family group texts, a cousin wrote the sentence that ended it. Just a small, honest, devastating question dropped into the middle of the loyalty. Wait, isn't that Sylvie's house they film in? That question did something the receipts alone couldn't. It moved through the family group texts, and then through the church directory, person to person, and it changed the shape of the story people were willing to tell themselves. Because it's one thing to defend a wronged family against a jealous daughter. It's another thing to realize the wronged family had been living, rent-free and ungrateful, in that daughter's house, filming a fake version of her over the erased face of her own child. The women who'd brought my mother casseroles started going quiet. A deacon's wife who'd known us 20 years commented under one of the reposts, publicly, just 4 words. I always wondered about that. The prayer chain that had been mobilized to defend the Radcliffes stopped forwarding. My mother's whole architecture of respectability, the thing all of this had been built to protect, was pulling itself down, and the people pulling it were the exact people whose good opinion had been the entire point. Online, it had stopped being gossip and turned into something colder. People weren't laughing anymore. They were counting. 60 crops. 6 years. 1 shoe left in 1 frame. They lined it all up, and they held it there, and they would not look away. Then Tara went public. She didn't have to. She'd signed things when she left that brand. She was taking a risk. But she posted the archive herself, all of it, in one long thread. The raw files and the messages side by side. My sister's own words in plain text under my son's cropped smile. Crop the boy. He's off-brand. Keep it to blood. There is a particular silence that falls over the internet when the receipts are undeniable, and it fell then. There was nothing left to argue. It was in my sister's own writing, dated, deliberate, stretching back years. The tearful video looked, in that light, like exactly what it was. People began finding the sponsors themselves, tagging them, screenshotting the archive into their mentions, asking the same simple question over and over. Did you know? One by one, the brand accounts that had happily lent their names to Blessed and Homegrown went silent, then started quietly deleting old collaboration posts, scrubbing their feeds of a family they'd been proud to be seen with a week earlier. The same erasure my sister had performed on my son was now happening to her, in public, by 1,000 hands, and no one had to lift a knife to a single photo. They just stopped wanting to be in the frame with her. Sponsors that had been reviewing the situation stopped reviewing. Cedarline's PR team, someone said, was already drafting a statement. That evening, my phone rang, and this time it wasn't a stranger's number. It was the house. I almost let it go. Then I answered, and I put it on speaker, and I set it on the hotel table, and I listened to my family panic. My mother was first, and she had found her warmth again. The rehearsed kind. The kind that came out right before she needed something. "Sylvie, sweetheart, this has all gotten so out of hand," she said, quick and honeyed. "You have to help us fix this. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them we love Micah. You're the only one they'll believe now." Then my sister, crying. Not the one-tear kind. The real kind, finally, now that it was her own life on the line. "Please, Syl, they're destroying me. You don't understand what this is doing to the brand. Please just say something." I let them talk. I stood by the hotel window with my arms crossed, and I let the whole thing wash over me. The honey and the tears, and the sudden urgent use of my name, and for the first time in 34 years, I felt no pull at all. No hook in my chest. Nothing reaching for their approval. It had simply gone. When there was a pause, I spoke, and I kept it very quiet. "You didn't call when he cried," I said. "Don't call now." There was silence on the line. My mother started to say my name again. I hung up. I stood there a moment longer. Then I noticed I was the one asking the questions now. Where would we live? What would Monday look like? What did I want? For 6 years I had been answering to that house. I wasn't answering to it anymore. They still went ahead with the shoot on Sunday. I have thought about that a great deal since. The sheer, desperate arrogance of it. The whole world had seen the clip and the crops, and my sister's own words, and Cedarline was one phone call from walking away, and still my sister decided the way out was to go live. To stage the family day anyway. To sit the Golden family down in my living room in front of a ring light and a streaming camera, and reclaim the narrative by sheer force of performance. Tara told me later she'd begged Brooke not to do it. Brooke did it anyway. I only know how it went because it was, of course, being broadcast. The stream opened on the perfect picture. My mother in pearls. My father silent in a pressed shirt. Colton with a steady hand on Harper's shoulder. Brooke in the center, luminous, smiling, welcoming everyone to a little family day, sponsored by our friends at Cedarline. Off to the side, unseen at first, stood a woman with a lanyard and a tight expression. The Cedarline representative, there in person, there to decide. Brooke began to talk. About love, about family, about how you couldn't believe everything you saw online. And beneath the stream, the comments were already turning, a fast dark river of them, thousands a second. Where's Micah? Whose house is this? We saw the messages. And I watched, from a hotel room, the exact moment the Cedarline representative quietly stepped out of frame, phone to her ear, her face gone pale. The picture was still perfect. It was just live now, and everyone was watching. and the frame could no longer keep out what it had been built to hide. I went to the house that Sunday for one reason. I went to get the last of my son's things. Not to confront them. I want that on the record. I didn't drive over to make a speech. I drove over because Micah's other jacket was still in a drawer in that house, and his books, and a stuffed rabbit he couldn't sleep without, and Monday was coming, and I wanted my child's belongings out of that place. I had a key. It was my house. I let myself in the side door while the stream ran in the living room. They didn't hear me at first, and then they did. The room turned. My mother, my sister, my father, Colton, the children, the Cedar Line representative just stepping back in. All of them turned toward me standing in the doorway of my own home, and every comment in that stream seemed to hold its breath at once because the whole internet knew exactly whose name was on the deed. And here she was, walking into the frame. For a second nobody spoke. My sister's smile hung on her face like something painted. I looked at my mother, and I did not call her Mom. Gail, I said. Just her name. Flat and clean. The warmth taken out of it the way she'd once taken it out of that porch light for me. She flinched at it. She had been my mother for 34 years, and I had never once in my life called her by her name. And she knew, in that instant, exactly what it meant. You've been filming a family in my house, I said, and cutting my son out of the picture. The room went completely silent. The stream in the corner kept running. Then it came apart, all at once, the way these things do. My mother stood up. Whatever composure she'd been holding on to snapped, and 34 years of it came out of her in one ugly, unguarded shout, straight into a live camera she'd forgotten was there. He was never really ours. The words hit the stream and detonated. You could see the comments freeze, then explode. She heard herself a half-second too late. I watched it cross her face, and her hand came up to her mouth. But it was gone. It was said. It was out in front of 8 million people and climbing. The Cedar Line representative didn't wait. She stepped forward, said something short and final that the microphone half caught. "We're done here," and walked out of the shot and out of the house. Within the hour, Cedar Line's statement was live. They were ending the partnership, effective immediately. Other sponsors followed by nightfall. My sister was saying my name. My father had his face in his hands. Colton was fumbling to end the stream and couldn't find the button. And in the middle of all of it, I did not raise my voice, and I did not gloat, and I did not stay to watch them drown. I went upstairs. I got the jacket, and the books, and the stuffed rabbit. On my way back through, I saw the crayon drawing, Micah's family, everyone holding hands, the small boy squeezed in on the left. Ms. Farrow had returned it in his folder that week. I picked it up off the hall table, next to the professional portrait with its little empty space, and I held it, and I walked out the front door into the daylight while behind me my mother's perfect family finished falling apart on camera. I didn't take anything down. I never posted a word. They did all of it to themselves. If you've ever been the one they were sure they could throw away, the quiet one, the one who wasn't favored, wasn't loud, wasn't real enough, I want you to tell me about it. Not because it changes what happened to me, because somebody scrolling past right now needs to hear that the quiet one was never the weak one. Leave it below. I read them. 2 weeks later, in a house that belonged only to the two of us, I hung a picture on the wall. It was a real one. Me and Micah, taken on his birthday, both of us mid-laugh, nobody arranged, the light coming from a window instead of a ring. I put it up in the front hall, where the first thing you'd see when you came in was the two of us, and beside it, I framed the crayon drawing, the one where he'd squeezed himself in on the edge so we wouldn't forget. Micah stood in the hall and looked at both of them for a long time, the photograph and the drawing, side by side. Then he pointed at the real one, the one with his whole grinning face in the very center of it, and he said quietly, like he still couldn't quite believe it was allowed, "I'm in this one." I had to kneel down and hold him then. I didn't try not to. The brand is gone. The sponsors are gone. My sister's perfect family turned out to be exactly as durable as a cropped photo. My father sent one short letter, in his own shaking handwriting, that said only, "I'm sorry, and I haven't answered it yet. And maybe I will, and maybe I won't." My mother has called. I let it go to voicemail. I left them one message of my own, in the form of a single fact. The house was always mine, and so was the boy, and they gave away the only things in that home that were ever real. I don't need them to understand it. I used to. I don't anymore. They spent years building a family for the camera. I spent 6 years building one for him. Only one of us was ever really home.